Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Brendan Cooke. He is a policy analyst at the Canada West Foundation. Brendan, we just started with one example of one of these new innovations, so crazy it just might work. Can you give us another example?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I'll, since we just talked about geothermal, I'll take a bit of a different spin on how geothermal can be used. So there is a nightclub right now in Scotland who is trying to reduce their emissions for their facility, and their primary emissions are coming from the heating and cooling of the building. And so what they're trying to do is find a renewable way to provide heating and cooling, and they're trying to essentially harness the heat that is generated by people dancing on their dance floor. So if you've ever been in a busy bar, it gets quite warm with everybody moving around. So they are using a heat pump. Picture essentially how a refrigerator works to pull the hot air off the dance floor, thereby cooling it. Take that hot air and inject it underground into a series of boreholes that have been drilled below the club. So they're essentially using the geothermal space, or the geology under the nightclub, to provide a geothermal storage for the heat. And so what they're able to do is, by using that heat pump, they cool the club when it's in use, store the heat underground, and then when heating is required for either hot water or for space heating within the facility, they can then take that heat that's been stored underground, bring it back up, and use it to heat the facility. And so by doing that, they expect to be able to remove, I believe, 3 of their boilers used to heat the facility at the moment, and reduce their carbon footprint by about 70%.
And is this in operation now, Brendan?
I believe so. Yeah.
Wow.
Early operation. So yeah, one of these, I guess, novel examples. It's not something that's obviously being used in a wide variety of applications at this point in time, but interesting when you get some local businesses that really adopt to the evolving technology.
And what are the applications? Basically, any building could be using this technology, I guess.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, you'd need to be able to build that geological storage potential under the building. So there would be some barriers in certain locations, I'm sure. But really, yeah, it's about using heat pumps and using renewable energy to provide heating and cooling, and yeah, application in a wide variety of different building types.
Can you give us another example from your study?
Yeah, sure. So I guess departing from the topic of geothermal, we also looked at some research being done out of the UK on nuclear batteries, and they call them a nuclear diamond battery. And so what that is it's a battery that is based off of nuclear waste, essentially. So they take the radioactive material from the carbon and graphite blocks that are used in nuclear reactors, and they gasify that radioactive carbon and use it to create man-made diamonds. So essentially the same way that you would create a man-made diamond for jewelry, they're creating it out of radioactive material. And then when that diamond, or any man-made diamond, is in the presence of radioactive material, it is able to produce a small electric charge. And so by creating the diamond out of the radioactive material, they've increased efficiency drastically, and they're able to essentially harness the energy given off by that radioactive decay to produce electricity in a small battery. So the charge that's given off by the battery is quite small, but the lifetime of the battery is quite large. And so these batteries are expected to last for 28,000 years. So longer than human civilization. So really, I guess in terms of where these are expected to be utilized, it's in areas where you're not going to be able to go and replace or refuel a power source. So lots of high altitude or deep sea sensing equipment, applications for space, and in the medical industry as well, in terms of pacemakers, those sorts of things where a small charge is required for a long duration.
I would imagine one of the hurdles they've got to get over is the immediate human concern over radioactivity. Is that one of the issues?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes both ways on this one. In one aspect, it is a means of consuming some radioactive waste, and so there is a benefit there. On the other side, anytime you say nuclear, people are going to start to be concerned with the safety aspects, and I assume in terms of health applications, that's going to be a greater concern as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to have part 3 of this interesting discussion with Brendan Cooke from the Canada West Foundation. We're going to take another brief break. So Crazy It Just Might Work is the title of his study, Really Interesting Innovations. Stay with us. We'll be back for another segment after these messages.